Shalom Aleichem. We want to now come to Sif Hey and Rishon and Gimel to finish off the Siman in Eretz Hashem with a number of Nakudas here to speak about in the Mishnah Berurah, which I'm sure you all have seen. We'll start first with the question of Panadish that the Shulchan Aruch speaks about, that you're allowed to put this pandish on top of the kedera to heat it up. So the Mishnah Berurah explains that the pandish is a kind of a meat knish. It's filled with meat and also, I guess, a certain amount of congealed fat which is in there, which is going to be significant as we go along. So the first point is that you're allowed to, even though it's cold and we're heating it up on Shabbos, by putting it in this spot, which is not considered a Shia Chazorah, it's not a Chazorah problem to put it there. It's also not a bishul problem, although it's cold, and we paskin in Sheni Ches that food which is cooled down all the way can't be heated up as a bishul problem. That's only by food that has liquid in it, rotev, and not something which is a davar yavish, like this pandish is. Or we consider it halachically to be a davar yavish. And the Mishnah Berurah adds that even if it has a lot of rotev karosh, even though there's a lot of this congealed fat in it, and the nature of congealed fat is when it heats up, it's going to liquefy. Nevertheless, since at the time you put it on the fire, it was a davar yavish, it was mavushal kol tzarko, it was totally cooked, and at the time you put it on, it was congealed at that moment, and so therefore that gives it the din of a davar yavish. And so even though it's going to liquefy afterwards and it's going to be heated up and cooked, we still look at it as it is now, not as it's going to be later on. So your active bishul is defined by what you do at the time you put it on, not what it's going to turn into later. We see this later on as well in Mishnah Berurah in Sivkot and Kuf, when he discusses there that the water that was heated up on Shabbos, which in a way we'll discuss in a moment how that happened, so you can use that to wash the dishes, as long as, he says, there's not a lot of congealed fat there. Because there, he says there as well as what he says over here, because then it would be a problem of no lot. If there's congealed fat, it can be a problem of no lot if you pour the water onto the dishes. So no lot, which is an issur d'Rabbanan, a question of muktzah or something similar to that, but it's certainly, he doesn't mention that it should be a problem of bishul, even though by putting the hot water onto that congealed fat, it's going to liquefy and be heated up in that water. But we paskin, again, over there like over here, that the bishul is defined by when you put it in. At that time it was still congealed, so the problem only becomes a secondary problem of nolad, which is a very important yesod. Another point in the Mishnah Berurah, something we discussed in the past, is that the Mishnah Berurah mentions over here that we're putting this on top of a kedera malay, taking this pandish and putting it on a pot of food. So we discussed last week that putting it on top of a pot of food is not considered a problem of chazorah, because since that's not the derech bishul bakach, you don't usually cook on top of another pot that has food in it, so then that's not a problem of chazorah. You're even chatchila to take it out of the refrigerator and put it there like cold chicken and put it on top of another pot. And the only problem we saw last week in Siv Gimel was that if you had an empty pot that you put there to be a blech and serve as a blech, then that's considered putting it directly on the fire and has a problem of chazorah. But if you put it on top of a pot that has food in it, so then the food is what's absorbing the heat directly from the fire, and you're considered putting it indirectly on the fire, not directly on it, and it's not a problem of chazorah. Now, another important point in the Mishnah Berurah, you see this through Sivkot and Sadi, through Sivkot and Sadi Gimel. You see this time and time again through the Mishnah Berurah, that if by putting it on a spot which will not be Yatzel lettuce bow, you could leave your hand there, it's not going to get burnt, then that's not even mixikam avashal. It doesn't even a problem of chazorah at all. It doesn't even look like you're cooking. It's not an issue whatsoever. And he says that a strong lashon that if it doesn't have heat of Yatzel lettuce bow, in lozeh shem tanur klal, it's not even considered a tanur anymore. We don't look at the fact that historically this tanur was hot, or hotter than Yatzel lettuce bow. We look at it as it is now, and at the moment, anything less than Yatzel lettuce bow is not considered cooking. So huadin, Shlomo Zalman, for example, says that if you could take chicken out of the fridge and put it l'chatchila onto a part of the blech, which is pachas mi'atzel lettuce bo. And this in a certain way is a type of a conundrum, but which not really once we understand it, that if you had it totally cooked in Erev Shabbos and you moved it off of that part of the blech, the hot part of the blech, to the lower part to keep it hot, so then that's considered a hemshech of the bishul hakodem. It wasn't a siluk from the bishul, and you could even slide it back to the hotter part later on, as long as it's moved called sarko. By the same token, you could also, so it's not considered off the fire, but by the same by what seems to be a contrary point, that what we just said, that you could take it out of the fridge and put it on that part, same part of the blech, and it's not considered putting it on the fire. And the difference is that since it's less than the yatzel lettuce bow, it doesn't have the isser of a tanur of putting it of a mixik and mavashal. But on the other side of the coin, since it is still warm, it keeps it warm there. So if you had intention from taking it off the fire to put it back on the fire, the actual fire, then putting it there is like holding it in your hand. It's no less than holding it in your hand. That it's no das misalik from the fire. So it's not really a contradiction, even though two contradictory halachas come out of the same yisod. Now this point of the Mishnah Berurah is something we have to keep in mind. We have to. I'm not going to rule anything about this now, but just going to raise the point, which is a very fascinating point about the new type of cooking, which is becoming more prevalent, the precision cooking, which is the official name is sous vide cooking, which used to be just in restaurants, and now it's available to the public, and a lot of people are using this to heat things at a very low heat, using a type of pressure, or I don't totally understand how it works without the pressure, but there's this method of cooking manages to cook things through and through to make them edible, although it's using heat often that's less than the yatzel lettuce bow. So on one hand, the Mishnah Berurah is saying that less than the yatzel lettuce bow doesn't have a din tanur at all. But if you had something that was heated up before, it was cooked, and now to, let's say, return it back to that water, so we have to really go into three questions. We have to know, is this considered a mode of bishul? Even though it's less than that heat, is it a type of bishul, even on the deraisa level? Similar to Rosh Zalman or Moshe and others discussed the machlokas, whether microwave that doesn't have a real heat source per se, it just, by the bombardment of electrons, it causes the food to heat up on its own right, and is that, so Rosh Zalman held that is a issue of bishul deraisa, and Ramosha differed with that because it's not dumya to Mishkan, although he does aser it. But that's one question. Do we have a new source of cooking now that also works less than yatzel lettuce bow? And there's also, I think, a second question of Shia v'chazara, that maybe the Mishnah Berurah only said that less than yatzel lettuce bow doesn't have a shem tanur by a mode of cooking which doesn't cook less than yatzel lettuce bow. But if a mode of cooking that the whole way that it works is less than yatzel lettuce bow, then we have to wonder if that is a problem of chazara as well. And lastly, since it cooks by putting it into a plastic bag, and that bag is immersed in the water, so then we have to go into the question of hatmana as well. Is that considered hatmana? Because it's there to retain the heat. So perhaps it's a third problem. Even put in Erev Shabbos, it might be considered by matmin b'davar hamosef hevel. I heard that Reb Belsky Zatzal was in the midst of writing a tshuva about this when he passed away, and I think it's very worthy of one day going into this more in detail. Another point of the Mishnah Berurah in Sifkat and Sadik Aleph is that he brings from the Magen Avram that the case that we're asking over there is even a davar yavesh, to do chazara even in a davar yavesh, even though there's no isser of bishul, there is an isser of shia l'chatchila. I'm sorry, of mixik and mavashal. So in the Biur Halacha, der maskil bevad shelenistan on the gamrei, there the Biur Halacha brings that Magen Avram, and even by something that doesn't have marak, to leis mishum bishul asarim nistanen, if it cooled down completely, so this tanai of putting it back in the fire, it has to be cooled. It can't be cooled down completely. The Magen Avram says that it's a new problem of chazara, because it's mixik and mavashal when it's cooled down the gamrei. And he brings from the Bira Gra, the Bira Lacha, that there's no such new Isser. There's no Isser of Miksik Hamavashal just because it's cooled down. Either you have the Tanai Chazor or not. There is no Miksik Hamavashal on that. If it's cooled down completely, the problem is a new problem, which is the problem of Bishul. If it's not a Bishul problem, then it's also not a Chazor problem. So that's how he decides in the Bir Lacha, but this seems to be a problem because previously in Sif Katan Sanach Ches, there the Mishnah Berurah said very clearly I can find that inside. Yeah, the Mishnah Berurah said there, if it's Stan in the Gamrei, Dafilu b'davar yave she'en bo marak de lo shayach bo bishul gam ken aser de keven shekvar nitztanen batla hashia harishona v'havei kanosan ata mechadash, and that's a problem of Miksik and Mavashal. So it seems to be a steer in the Mishnah Berurah, which is pointed out also by Shmir Shahavas Gilchasa, and at this point it's Sarach Iyun. Does the Mishnah Berurah hold that there is this new Isser of Miksik and Mavashal just because it's cooled down by something which is, let's see, if you're holding it in your hands with Das Lahachzir and never touched the karka or anything, and you got into a long conversation and it cooled down the Gamrei, is there now a new Isser to return it because is that now Miksik and Mavashal, or since it fulfills all the Tanoim and there's no Bishul problem, is it okay to put it back on? So, and according to the Mishnah Berurah and the Sifkat and Samach Ches, it should be mutter. According to what it seems to say in Bir Halacha here, it seems to be a problem. So that reigns right now with Sarach Iyun. There are a number of points also in this Sif which are very important for the sugya of Amir La'akum. We'll just point out a few of the points today. So the Ramah in the middle of Sif Hey says, "V'chol hadvarim she'asur lasos midvarim elu asur lomar le'enu Yehudi lasos." All these things that we can't do, we can't tell a goy to do. L'chen asur lomar le'enu Yehudi lahecha makdera imnitztanim. You can't ask a goy to heat up your pot that cooled down. So here the Gra points out, and the Gra strongly holds this all the way throughout these halachas, that the word kol, anything, is referring to even Isurim D'Rabbanan, not only Isurim D'Oraisa, which is heating up this cold pot, which might be an Isur D'Oraisa, but even D'Rabbanans, anything that's Asur for us to do D'Rabbanan is also Asur to ask a goy to do. It's all Nichlal in the Isur of Amir La'akum. And we see further this in the Sharat Tzion, in Sifkat and Sadik Vav, a little bit later in the Sif. There the Mishnah Berurah says that, going in this Mishnah Berurah in Sadik Hey, that it says we can't ask him to heat up the Kedera. The Mishnah Berurah says, "Afilim lo yitna al gabia eish or akira mamish to shuv emezim mishum isar chazara." Even if it's not mamish on there, alfa piken asur mishum isar bishol kem shenistan on the gamrei. We call Makam Kasam Magan Avram B'Shar Chorna de B'Diavad Yesh Lahatir Tavshil B'Ofen Zeh Shelo Himiru Al Gabe Eish Mamish. B'Diavad, you could say you could be matir it, as long as you didn't put it Mamish Al Gabe Eish. But you do see though that if you put it Mamish Al Gabe Eish, then there is no Makam Lahatir. So in Sifkat and Sadik Vav, the Sharat Tzion points out, D'imi Miru Al Gabe Eish Yesh Lezeh Yisr L'Kuli Alma B'Shum Chazara V'Asr Ach B'Diavad. Then there will be no heter at all. Even though putting it on the Eish now, since there's no bishul involved, it's only Nesur Rabbanan. This he says the name of the Pri Megadim. And afterwards he says, not like the Maggid Avram that wants to say that in the name of the Mordechai that it should be mutter b'diavad. So the Mishnah Berurah seems to go with this throughout the Siman, that even Isurim D'Rabbanan are asur even b'diavad. They were done ayde akum. We're not going to say that it's a shvus to shvus and b'diavad is mutter. Rather, we done it like it was done l'chatchila for you, and it remains asur. And now. However, we do see another very important klal over here, in the Mishnah Berurah Sifkat and Sadi Tes. And this, going on this halacha over here of the Tanur Beis HaCharef, that it was the custom to ask the goy lahedya to take your pot of cool down cholent or whatever it is, and put it on top of the tanur, the special tanur they had to heat up the houses. So it wasn't not a tanur for cooking; it was a tanur for heating up the house when it was cold. And this din is from the Trumas Hadeshin that was machadish that since the ikar kavana of the goy to light this fire is not to cook, but rather it is to heat up the house, and that's mutter because hakol cholam etzil atzina. So it's an isur rabbanan to ask a goy to do something, but since it's makom choli, because without that people get sick because of the cold, he's allowed to heat it up. And the Mishnah Berurah spells out over here from the Trumas Hadeshin that the reason it's mutter, even though the goy knows that he's going to be heating up the pot by turning on the Tanur Beis HaCharef, since his ikar kavana is to heat up the house, not the pot, and the Mishnah Berurah points out it has to be that type of a stove which is mainly used to heat up the house. It's not also commonly used to heat up food. So that determines that the ikar kavana is considered for the house and not for the food. So in that case we say that although it's a psik reisha that's going to heat it up, we're not machmir for amira to lanachri b'ofen shel psik reisha. So if something's only a psik reisha to happen, so then there's not a problem of asking a goy to do that. That's the yisod that comes out of this sif, which is a very, very important yisod. And this shaila comes up in many situations, such as if somebody forgot to disconnect the light in the refrigerator. So are you allowed to ask a goy to open up the fridge to take it out, which will depend on the shaila whether or not opening the light in the fridge through the door, is that considered a direct act or is that considered a psik reisha? If it's a psik reisha, then it's not a problem. If that's the direct way of opening the door, which Rosh Zalman Auerbach is noted to say, because that's the only way to turn on that light, so that's the way to turn on, that's no longer a psik reisha. That's different than over here in the Tanur Beis HaCharef, that over here, this tanur is not usually used to heat up a pot. So therefore, what you do is not considered a direct act, but rather an act of psik reisha, and it's mutter over here. But every case of psik reisha will have to don. If it is a psik reisha, then there's a heter of amir la'akum, because we're not machmer amir la'akum for psik reisha. It's a very important yisod from this sif. The Mishnah Berurah takes us further in Sifkat and Kuf, and talks about in those days they had a kind of a plate inside was part of the tanur, and in order for that plate that held the, whatever function there, but you had to keep water in that plate inside the tanur to not burst from the heat. So you had to fill it with water. If that water was inside there, and then the goy heated up that tanur to heat up the house, so then you could in turn use that water afterwards to heat it to wash things or to wash your hands, whatever. You could. It's not considered directly done for Shabbos, because the kavanah wasn't to heat up the water. The kavanah was to heat up the house, and so that, again, so copy the water, it's considered a psik reisha. I think that this halacha of the water somewhat calls in question Rosh Zalman's chiluk when he says that the light in the refrigerator is more than a psik reisha. It's a direct act because that's the way you turn it on. You could tie into the same thing, which should apply to this water also, that the water is always there whenever you heat up this type of oven. And so maybe you'd say that's a direct act, not a psik reisha, but even so we consider it a psik reisha. So I think that calls into question an important shaila on Rosh Zalman's ruling about the light in the refrigerator. Just another couple of points. The Mishnah Berurah says that when it comes to the question of nolad in Sifkat and Kuf over here with the water that you're allowed to use to wash the dishes once it's hot already, so the Mishnah Berurah says that you should make sure that you don't directly pour the water onto the plates if they have congealed fat on them, if you have shemen and kara shalayim, because that would be a maisa, be a dayim of nolad, and that's a problem on Shabbos. Rather, just put the plates in it, and then when it melts, it'll melt on its own. If you pour the water over it, but you're going to keep on pouring, and then it's going to get A, it'll be nolad, and B, if it keeps on melting, by the time you finish pouring, so it might already be liquid, and then that could even turn into a bishul problem. So we're only going to go after the initial state of the shuman if your entire maisa was done in the initial state. If you continue to do a maisa afterwards, then it becomes a maisa b'daim, and then it could also turn into a problem, not only of nola, even of bishul as well. And lastly, the Ramah, at the end, it says that Kfarnis bar shenagu l'hakel b'chazar b'Shabbos afilu henicha gabi karka. We discussed that in the last year, that there are 2 shiurim ago, that the Ramah over here says that the minig is based on the Yerushalmi, that if somebody left something on the gabi karka, b'diavad, you could put it back on the fire, because according to the Yerushalmi, it's only usher when it was taken off on Erev Shabbos and put out on Shabbos, and it's a very strong Lashon Ramah over here that he says nahagu l'hakel. So even though we don't do it l'chatchila, but if in a shasat chak, there's certainly what to rely on, even if it was a gabi karka. And lastly, the Ramah says huadin lismoch l'tanur she'enu gar v'katum. It's also okay to be somich, to put it next to a tanur, not on it, but next to it. In those days, there were ceramic, and it was a lot of heat was being sent on the outside of the tanur as well. Hol v'akdera dayin cham uvishkol tzorko, since it's hot and it's completely cooked. V'chen minig pashut lahatir. So this question of lismoch over here, there's a diun in the Bir Halacha. The mashmos of the Ramah sounds like you're allowed to, well, if it's juxtaposed to the previous statement, then it's only a heter of chazara. If it's a separate statement, huadin is not really a continuation, but it's really a new statement. So then the Ramah might be talking even about shihil l'chatchila, that even if it was taken straight out of the fridge, to put it to be somach to the tanur, which would then be similar to it being cham v'mushak called tzarko. So the mashmos of the Ramah is that it's continuation, and it's only talking about chazara, and that's why the Ramah stipulates that it's cham v'mushak called tzarko, because he's still working within the Tanai chazara on Shabbos. However, the Bir Halacha does discuss two studin and seems to be more noket that it's mutter, that it's only going to be a continuation, a chazara, but not a shia l'chatchila. Although previously in the Siman, Mishnah Brura and Sivkot and Tesvav seemed like he was more noted to say that it's mutter even shia l'chatchila ayadei smicha, which would then be a little bit of a steer to what he seems to say over here. So I guess we'll have to say tzarach iyun on that point. Just to mention one point of the Ramban this week, that we're seeing the Ramban in Perek Beis, Pasuk Gimel, where Kadosh Baruch Hu introduces Shabbos, and it says the lashon of V'yivarach, he was Mevarach Shabbos, and V'yikadosh also. And as we know, Rashi says that the bracha was Baman, Baruch Baman, V'kidshay Baman, V'amikra Kasav Ala Asid. That's the Rashi, and the Ramban has a problem with this. He says, "Ein mashma hakasav she'daber ala asid." If Hashem was mevarach and mekadosh it, he was mevarach and mekadosh it now. So then, in what way would it be? What ala asid? Why would Rashi only pick something as if we don't know that until the man falls twice on double on Erev Shabbos and doesn't fall on Shabbos? Then until then we don't know that he was really mevarach and mekadosh as a Shabbos. So what does Rashi really mean? So in the Maral says that Rashi's bringing it's a raya. It's a raya of V'yivarach v'Kadosh, which that seems to even be more difficult. The Kilu Kiviyachol Kadosh Baruch Hu needs a raya that he was Mevarach from Kadosh or Shabbos. He needs a raya through the man. So the Maral is not really answering anything; is even making it more of a pella. So we don't really have the time here to go into it fully, but I'll just mention very briefly that, and if you want to see more, in Pachid Yitzchak, or Hutner Zatzal, in his Sefer on Shabbos, speaks about this Rashi with great arichus, and it's very kadai to see inside to really see and understand the really sodas of Shabbos. But the point that he says, and again, I apologize for not really explaining it properly because we don't have the time to do so, but anyone interested could look Ayin Sham, that the Yisod of Shabbos, Klapi HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is not that things really stopped, because we know Klapi HaKadosh Baruch Hu, flowers still bloom on Shabbos, and babies are born on Shabbos. The world goes on Kemin Haganoheg. So in what way is it that Hashem is nach on Shabbos? So what he explains over there, based on a Mishnah on Shabbos and Tzaddik Gimel, is that the Yesod of Shabbos, Chavei Kodesh Baruch Hu, is not really that things stop, but that everything that exists in the world is nullified, becomes batal to something higher, to something ruchniistic. It's batal to the tachlis and the tafkid, which it's tzad haruchni. And in that way, the things can actually continue to go on from a Kadosh Baruch Hu's perspective, because he has the power to mevatel everything to its higher purpose, its higher tachlis. So all the physical world, the entire physical world, is able to be batal to the Olam Ruchni, to the Olam Asid, and therefore it doesn't need to stop. The one thing that exists in the world, which is not really, it doesn't belong to the Olam HaGashmi, that you could say that is batal to the Olam Ruchni, but instead it is a part of the Olam Ruchni itself, is Man. Man, the Ramban speaks later on, and I believe it's Parshas Shlach, or it might be Parshas B'Shalach, I don't remember right now. The Ramban speaks at great arichos that the Man that's the Michael Kivyocho that the Malachi Yashar is Ochlim Oso. And it's Kula Ruchni, it's Kuloi, Klai Yisrael were living on a matzav that was Kula Ruchni at that time. And the Michael they ate was Kula Ruchni. It was something that was Tal Sh'asir Kadosh Baruch Hu L'Hachayos Mason. That Tal is, that Hashem is going to bring back the Mason, that's really, was concretized into the Man. So it is a pure Davar Ruchni. A Davar Ruchni doesn't really become batal to the Ruchnius, because it is part of the Ruchni itself. So it can't continue to fall like it does every other day and just say it's batal to Olam Ruchni, because it is part of the Olam Ruchni. So from the Man we see the Yesod of Shabbos, that what it means, v'yivarcho, v'yikadsho, the Kedusha of Shabbos, is that not that other things don't need to stop. They don't need to stop because they become batal, but the Man needs to stop, because that's the only way that it could show that it's subservient to Shabbos by it actually stopping, because it can't be batal to anything higher. It is part of what we're batal everything to. So that's what Rashi is bringing down, that we're going to see not al shem asid, that Chas v'Shalom it's not Kadosh and Mavurach until then, but al shem asid that we saw then what it means that Hashem is Mekadosh the Shabbos. The Man is that one indicator over the Lumdus, the Amkus of what it means for Shabbos to have its bracha and its kedusha. With that, a good Shabbos, and Mitzvah Hashem, we will next week go to the Shmir Shabbos Kol Chasa as written in the Mar Makomos, and then afterwards will be a time for Chazorah to go back over all the Mishnah Berurah of the Sif, and to know the Maskanos, also the Shmir Shabbos as well. And after that, Mitzvah Hashem will have the Bechina to finish off this section of halacha of Shia v'Chazar as far as we're going to be going into it. Kol Tiv.